Hi everyone, I am very much glad to have you all for the today's session. Today we are going to understand about Azure Active Directory, and also we have a very special expert speaker with us for this amazing session today. We have Nandita, who is an amazing contributor to Azure, and like she has been a great part of our community last year as well. So, with that note, I welcome you, Nandita, to our today's session. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm also doing great. Great. So I guess we're good to go. We can just start up. I'll be in the backstage and we can start with our session.
Sure. Let me share my screen.
Yeah, sure.
Please let me know when can you see my screen.
Yeah, it's visible.
You can see it, right?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay. So hi everyone to the today's session, and it's my pleasure to be explaining to you today about Azure Active Directory. Something about me. My name is Nandita Gaur. I'm working in Microsoft as Dynamic Support Engineer, and in my day-to-day life, I deal with Azure Active Directory a lot. So yeah, let's tell about how you can use it to make your organizations better. Let's start with the session. So today, this is our agenda. We are going to be talking about mainly four things. First, we'll start with the introduction, what Azure is, what Azure Active Directory is. Then we'll move on to how to install Azure Active Directory, how to make it working for your organization. Then we'll move towards managing users, groups, and licenses. That is the most part that I deal with it in my day-to-day life as well. And then we'll move towards the security features of AD. So yeah, let's start with the introduction. So what basically Azure Active Directory is? It is an identity and access management service. So what do we mean by identity and access management? So for example, you're part of an organization, and every organization has some access management features in place. So by access management features, I mean like some companies, they allow their employees to use a certain feature, certain softwares on laptops. Some companies don't allow, and every company, everybody has a role. So by using Azure Active Directory, you can, your whole organization can run. So and the most interesting feature of Azure Active Directory is it can be used with almost all the Microsoft products. And you can use it with M365, like you're using for offices. On Teams, you might have seen a feature called as organization, where you can see where do you lie in your organization and which part you are on. In Azure, of course, you can use it, and in Dynamics also, I've been using it on a daily basis. So, a complete organization structure, you can run it on Azure Active Directory. Let's move to our next slide. So, let's see how do we work actually with Azure Active Directory. So first we have to create a tenant. So tenant means your organization. So every organization is represented by the keyword tenant. So you can create a free tenant that would be like something like abc.onmicrosoft.com. So if you don't have your own tenant, so you would be appended by a prefix, postfix on microsoft.com. But you can also create your custom domains. So by creating a custom domains, your organization can have a perfect identity. So for example, I work in Microsoft, so I can have like microsoft.com. You might be working in some other organization, let's say Contoso, then you can have a contoso.com. So having a custom domain, it gives us a benefit of a particular identity to stand by your brand. So using AAD, you can also associate your custom domains with that. But mind that domains have to be hosted on some other services. like GoDaddy.com, and there are various other services you can associate it with. So let's say you chose your custom domain, uh, for example, contoso.com. So the next step would be to verify the domain host. So verification, it can be done in text files or MX files, any type you choose. And fourth step would be to associate a subscription. So as you might know that in Azure, every organization or every person, they should have a subscription so that they can use a certain set of features. So if you are connecting your custom domains and you're creating your own tenant, and so you must associate a subscription. So there are three ways in which we can associate a subscription. So one subscription for one tenant, multiple subscriptions for one tenant. So it could happen like two three people, they make a company, they have separate Azure subscriptions. So these three people can combine and make a subscription. But what we cannot do is use multiple tenants for one subscription. So under one subscription you will be allowed only one tenant, that is, a subscription can have only one tenant. So after you associate a subscription, you can add your policies and branding. By policies, I mean that whenever you log in into any service or any organization's page, you might see some there are policies written, and every organization has a branding also. By branding, I mean uh, like you can add your company logos, your company colors. There might have been some. So AAD gives us feature to do all of that. I hope that's clear. If you have any question, you can let me know side by side. Okay, let's move towards the second topic of the day. That would be users, groups, and licenses. So let's start with the groups, how you can manage a user. So every organization, there are like thousands of people joining the organization, thousands of people leaving the organization. And if we were to maintain the records like separately, then it would be a very hectic task. So what you can do with Azure Active Directory, there is a single click by which you can create user. Single click to delete all the users. So, what are the features of managing users? So, primary feature is adding and deleting users. So, you can add the profile pictures, you can add the age of users. Age, I have mentioned that because some organization have age restricted policies also. For example, some school is using AAD, and they might have people from various age groups. Some people could be uh, older than 12 years, some content is designed for older than 16 years, some content is for children less than 6 years of age. So by age restriction policies we can do that. We can also manage user other policies like stay signed in. So for example, in a browser session I opened any service. So if I open another service, so do you want to log in again to that service, or if within a browser session you have to stay signed in? So everything you can do, and you can also reset passwords of a user. Uh, like there are many things you can play around with the user. There are a lot of things. Second thing which you can do is assign roles to a user. So what do I mean by assigning roles? So the basic feature, like the most important feature of the Azure Active Directory is role-based access control. So every user should have a role. So for example, I am a support engineer. So I have a support engineer in my role, but there might be some other team which might have, let's say, financial role. There might be some another team, some other person who is having. So I mean, you can get it. Every person is having a role. A person can have multiple roles also. It's not that one person means one role. So Azure Active Directory gives us the flexibility to assign multiple roles to a user. And multiple roles can be assigned to a user, and a user can be assigned to multiple roles. It's like that. Also, the third most important feature nowadays is guest and member users. So, by let me tell you the what do we mean by member users. So, the people who are permanently part of organization, who are part of the tenant domain. We created a domain called contoso.com. So the people who are part of Contoso, so they would be called as member users. But let's say Contoso hires some people from other companies. like vendors or something like that. So they would be treated as guest users. So why to have mentioned the feature of guest and member user? Because every user we can apply different restrictions. So if you are a member user, then you might have higher privileges. If you are a guest user, you might have lower privileges. So I have put a question for you, like to make it just a bit interactive. So can a member user log in into AAD to change their own password and to change their own rule? Um, let's see if somebody answers. Chavi, can you please let me know if there are people? Okay, let me tell the answer of that question. So every member user, every guest user, they can log in into AAD. They can change their own passwords, but they cannot change their own rules. So changing rule or applying rules, it applies only to the global administrator. Only global administrator can they have some access. So that access can be also controlled using Azure Active Directory. Let's move to the next slide. So this slide covers about managing groups and licenses. So let me tell you about a group. So for example, if you can see my pointer here. So let's say there is an organization called as Contoso. It might have many different departments in that. So I have, for example, I've taken only two departments. First one is engineering department. Second one is payroll department. Let's say there could be another like legal department and sales department. So these are the departments. These can be called as groups. So each group has a different set of users in them. User one, user two. So maybe third user could be associated to payroll. Maybe there could be another user that could be associated directly to Contoso. So with Azure Active Directory, it is so much easier to manage all these groups. So for example, engineering team requires access to various, let's say, software A and software B. So if we were not using Azure Active Directory, then we would have to go to user one, then assign them access to software one, software two. Then we would have to go next to user two, assign them software separately. But using Azure Active Directory, you can assign the access to group, and whatever access they have can be applied to user one and two. For example, next, let's say payroll team, they should have access to user data, all user data. But engineering team does not require access to all the user data. So user restrictions on engineering team and can grant access to the payroll team so that all the members of payroll team get the user access. So there is also one more interesting feature of Azure Active Directory. For example, software one and two, user one is having, software one and two, user two is having. But maybe user one requires privilege to another software. So they can uh, these privileges can be assigned specifically to user one. So it is like that. So and now let's talk about the licenses. So for example, the Contoso company, they have purchased licenses of Microsoft Dynamics, and now they want to apply license for each user. So another, so it might be a headache, like we could have been going user by user. So now we can, let's say they purchase three licenses. Without AAD, we would have to go to user one, apply license one, user two, apply license two. Using this architecture of Azure Active Directory, we can directly apply two licenses to engineering. It would go to per user. We could apply remaining one license to payroll team. It could go to the users of that team. So this is how Azure Active Directory can help you in managing all the licenses you have. So it is. I'm just giving small examples. If you think of a big scale industry where licenses are for like 15 products, maybe 20 products, so managing them, that could be all done through one single portal. That would be Azure Active Directory. If you have any questions, you can like put it in the chat, or we can move ahead. Okay, let's moving ahead. So this is our last slide for the day. So there are some security features. So first feature I would like to emphasize on is multi-factor authentication. So Azure Active Directory is granting us access to multi-factor authentication. So what does it mean? So earlier times, what used to happen that people used to log in and they used to have a password. Then they would log in into that service, but those passwords were like shareable. I've come across some other features like detecting the device. So let's say I'm logging in from Lenovo, but if somebody gets hold of my password and they are logging in from Dell, then the max security that I have seen, that I would get a notification that okay, you have logged in from a different device. But what would I do by the time the damage would have been done? So AD is giving us this very flexible option of using multi-factor authentication. So how it works is that we log in and we will get a OTP on our secure device. Secure device, as in we could get it on our phones or on our personal emails. So that way how it works. So you can set multi-factor authentication for all the users in your group. Earlier it used to be like an optional feature. So let's say I'm part of Microsoft. So Microsoft does want me to use MFA, then I have to use it. Earlier I could use it or not use it. It was like up to me. But being on an organization level, you can set it for all the people in your organization and keep the important data safe. The second feature I would like to highlight on is identity secure score. So this is like a secure score. Okay, so it is like a number, like a percentage. Let's say 90%, 40%, 30%. Microsoft will give it to you. So first, Microsoft Azure, they will analyze the security implemented at your organization level. Then they will compare it based on the standard practices, standard good practices, and how much do you follow them. They will give you a score. So let's say my organization gets 40%. So then I should indicate that my organization is not as secure as it looks like. So I would, then they will also suggest you ways you can improve the score. This is one of the features of yeah. So the third feature I would like to emphasize on is it can integrate with almost like all the products. I've mentioned like a few competitors like ServiceNow, Salesforce, AWS. AD can be integrated with Azure Web Services. So, for example, if you're part of an organization and your product is using AWS, but the users are there, so they can be hosted on Azure Active Directory. Uh, yeah, so I think I would like to emphasize on that. The fourth feature would be role based access control. So I think I already talked about this. So let's say I am support engineer and I should have access to these softwares. I should not be allowed to have access to other softwares. So AAD can help you implement them. And this is called as policies. So the policy is like a rule. Like if you are Nandita, you should not access that software. If you are this person, then you should be able to do that. So we can implement it on an organization level. So in all I can say is that if there is an organization and it needs a structural implementation where if a person is joining the organization, you are adding those details. If a person who is leaving the organization, you are deleting them instantly, ending all their licenses in an instant. So what you should use is Azure Active Directory. And developers, how they can use it. uh, so each developer, they can like whenever they are developing any software, so the restrictions considering all the groups and policies, so you can like put in the code like what is the group based control, like you can implement the role based controls considering that yeah, there would be other person in the organization, if they have access to all these things, and so similarly they can use their other products. So yeah, I'm up to questions now. This is the end of my presentation. I hope I was able to give you a good introduction of the Azure Active Directory. And if you have any request, any follow-up questions, I am up for it. guess I'll stop sharing my screen. Do we have any questions, Chavi? Am I audible?